good evening and welcome. Thank you so much for hosting me here in the great state of North Dakota. And thanks to Caleb and the whole team at the YRs. It's been a great 24 hours here so far, and I'm excited to spend the evening with you. So part of the reason I love being in North Dakota is two of my all-time favorite statesmen, Teddy Roosevelt and Otto von Bismarck, have a connection to this place. And it's very rare that those two statesmen intersect in a particular place. I'm going to talk a little bit about both of them here tonight. I also believe that North Dakota is a model for the nation, right? You are feeding America, you are powering America, you have high GDP, low unemployment, you're a pro-life state, you're opposed to the radicalism that's sweeping higher education and the medical establishment in this country. And I think you're really a model at a pivotal time in the U.S. So even though I'm here to be the keynote speaker, I'm really here to learn from you all, and hopefully we can imitate what you have going throughout the rest of the country. So who am I? So I'm a son of the Midwest. I was born in Ohio, raised in Michigan. My dad worked in the auto industry in the Detroit area. And after the economic impact of 9/11 and then the China shock of China entering the World Trade Organization, the auto industry suffered quite a bit in the mid-2000s when I was growing up. And so, through no fault of his own, my dad lost his job probably 3 or 4 times in the manufacturing industry. And so eventually, at some point, he said, we need to take our future into our own hands. And at the time, our family hobby was winemaking. So we actually would make wine in the basement. And there were numerous times when wine would just spray all over the ceiling, and my dad would tell me, go run upstairs, don't tell your mother, get the cleaning supplies, and we would clean everything up. And for 2 years in a row, in like 2001, 2002, we won Best of Show at the Michigan State Fair for wine. And so finally we were talking and decided, let's buy 20 acres of land and plant a vineyard. And so we went from the manufacturing industry to the wine business, and that was really a full-time affair. We were planting vines, tending the grapes, harvesting. I was working behind the bar when I was like 12 years old, talking to customers. And that was really my entire life growing up. Every weekend, every summer, every evening around the dinner table. It was really my family who instilled those values of faith, perseverance, hard work, common sense, and of course hospitality that have really shaped my life throughout. But I went to a small regional public school, and this was before public schools really were particularly ideological, but really focusing on sports was kind of the only thing we did at our public high school. I had a great time, but when it was time for me to go to college, my dream was to go to the University of Michigan. I was set to go there, and a family friend said, you really should come and check out a lecture at Hillsdale College. And Hillsdale, for those of you who don't know, is kind of a classical, great book style college. It doesn't take any money from the federal government. And I literally knew nothing about the great book. I had never heard of the concept of a great book in my life. And I went down to hear this lecture on Abraham Lincoln, and it just blew my mind. It was like history came alive, all the ideas, the American principles, and I said, I really could see myself going here. So I got into Hillsdale. I don't think I'd get in today, because it's much harder to get in than it is now. And it changed the trajectory of my life. I went in knowing, I had the conservative values, but I didn't really have the ideas. I learned everything there. By the time it was my senior year, I took a class with our college president, Larry Arnn, and it was my relationship with Larry that really helped bring me to ISI. And also, as I look back to the people that sat around that table in that classroom, I was tremendously blessed. I mean, one of my close friends in that class was a speechwriter for President Trump. Another one is on the Wall Street Journal editorial board, and another one clerked on the Supreme Court as the Solicitor General of Ohio. And this is just like blew my mind coming from right there, because I was basically a townie who ended up going to Hillsdale myself. So that's my background. Just so you're familiar with it, I ran the American Conservative magazine, which was founded by Pat Buchanan, and then came to ISI 4 years ago. And we're really on the front lines in college campuses around the country, educating college students in American principles and the principles of Western civilization. And then this past year, I put together a book on statesmanship called Gateway to Statesmanship, which I talked about a little bit earlier at the VIP reception. But the idea behind the book is that we're so dissatisfied with the leadership class that we have in Washington, D.C. today, but it's easy just to spend all of our time complaining about it. I really wanted to do something at the educational level for young people to raise up a new generation of American leaders. So the book is really kind of a walk through history at the ideas and qualities that make for good political leaders. So that's what I do for a living, and I'm here tonight to offer some reflections as a young person who shares your values on how we can save America together. So I want to begin with some sobering news. The American dream is dead. The American dream is dead. This is not the country for most of you, if you grew up part of the baby boomer generation or Gen X. This is not the same America today than the one that you grew up in. Edmund Burke, the famous father of British conservatism, who was actually a proponent of American independence, wrote that society is a partnership of the dead, the living, and the unborn. A partnership of the dead, the living, and the unborn. In our American context, that means that we actually need to pass this baton of this experiment of self-government under the law, this experiment in liberty, from one generation on to the next. And right now, I believe that that baton is being dropped with my generation and the generations beneath me. Over 65% of young people under the age of 30 align with the Democratic Party. But even worse than that, nearly 80% of those under 30 do not believe that the American dream holds true. That's four out of five people under 30 don't believe that it holds true. So what's going on here? Well, some of it might be due to the lack of civic education, right? Perhaps only if young people knew more about the Constitution and American history, they would be more grateful for the legacy of our country. Well, I think that might be part of the picture, but there are some much more fundamental realities at play here. Let's take the economy first and foremost. Right now, basically, your date of birth determines whether you will be part of a permanent renter class in America who's dependent on debt, or whether or not you'll be part of an owner class, a homeowner class, a class that can actually have financial independence and self-sufficiency. In the Biden economy right now, the median home price in America is about $420,000. $420,000. And it's great if you locked into a mortgage with 3% interest rates, many years ago. But if you're a young 30-year-old, starting out with a young family trying to buy a home, start to add up these expenses. If you have a 30-year fixed mortgage with taxes and insurance, you're looking at about $3,100 a month. Plus a used car payment is over $500 a month for the average car payment. The average student loan is almost $400 a month. Health insurance $150. So you're looking at $4,200 a month. Now the problem is that the median American makes $4,900 a month. This is the median adult American. So if you do the math, if you have a traditional family and you're operating on a single income, you only have $700 left for your utilities, your gas, your groceries, your food, and your clothes, right? So that doesn't work, right? And if you just go back 5 years ago in this country, only 5 years ago, and you run all the same numbers and you adjust for inflation, a family on a single income would have had almost $1,500 left over at the end of the month. So in the course of 5 years, we've really made a normal American life impossible for most people, right, unless you lock into a mortgage when the interest rates are low. And so this forces young people to either be part of this permanent renter class, and the median rent in America is now $2,000 a month for an apartment, $2,000 a month, or to move back home, right, into your parents' basement. So young people today, they're cynical about America. They feel a sense of doom. I was talking to a young person the other day, and young people spend a lot of time on TikTok, and there's a lot of perpetual outrage about all this, right? And he was telling me that he feels as though everything that he's ever been told about America is a lie. Everything he's ever been told about America is a lie. Now, some of that might be exaggerated, right? Perhaps you could debate what sources is he getting the information from, but regardless of that, the sentiment is very real, right? They fear that they'll never be able to afford a home, find a spouse, afford to have children, or even save for retirement. And if Social Security were to run out in 2041, and Gen Z were to live their life as renters, not putting anything away for retirement, what will they demand of the government when they go to retire and they don't have anything left? So when you combine this stark economic reality with a couple other things, the spiritual, societal crisis of meaning and belonging that our country is facing. At the time, we had our political independence from Great Britain, but we were still stuck within a colonial British imperial economic system, and it was really the party of Lincoln that developed the economic policies to break us free so that we could become an independent technological and manufacturing power that would one day eclipse Great Britain. It was the party of Lincoln that passed the Homestead Act, and that perhaps brought many of your own families here to the state of North Dakota. This was 10% of America was actually given away, right? The whole West was settled largely because of the Homestead Act. So this wasn't a government giveaway the way that we think of programs operating today, right? To qualify for the Homestead Act, you had to be married, you had to be a citizen, you had to build a home, you had to live on the land for 5 years, and you had to have the testimony of your neighbor. So this was a very communally and civic-minded way to encourage Americans to settle the West. Additionally, there was unprecedented economic growth. 4% GDP growth a year from basically the time of the end of the Civil War to World War I. And during this period, Republicans won. Basically, there was only one Democrat that was elected during this entire 50-year period. So it was a total era of Republican dominance. So the country might be in a rough spot, but our party built the American dream, and we can do it again. Great leaders have also emerged from North Dakota before. Think of Teddy Roosevelt, right? He came here because his wife and his mother died on the same day in the same house, right? It's crazy. His wife and his mother literally died on the same day. And so he came to North Dakota to find himself, to get action, to live this strenuous life. And he came in here a boy, and he left a man, and together we can do it again. And today, North Dakota is a city on the hill. From economics to culture to law to education, your policies offer hope to a nation in despair. And together, we can do it again. We can restore the American dream and build a Republican majority at the national level that lasts for a generation. So how do we do it? Well, I have a blueprint that I want to share with you tonight. But before I share that, I just want to say 3 very brief things. First and foremost, even though we have these issues with young people, we cannot build our party's platform around what young people want, right? Around the niche issues that young people care about. We have to restore the American dream, and then they will come. Why is that? The Democrats will always appeal to the niche issues that young people care about, celebrities care about, better than us. And if we make half measures in that direction, right, it'll be seen as a fraud. They're always going to beat us in that game. So we need to restore the American dream first and foremost. The second thing is that while it's important to strengthen fiscal conservatism and economic growth to address all the problems that I just mentioned at the beginning, we also need to be a party that's pro-family and pro-life and understands that unless we have that cultural foundation, all of the economic prosperity is worthless. And then finally, we need to be willing to get into the arena. I think that's a lot of what the North Dakota Young Republicans are doing, is encouraging new candidates to get into the arena. It's not enough simply to have an R next to your last name, right? We actually have to fight to take this party back for conservatism throughout this country. And for that, I'd like to turn again to Teddy Roosevelt. I'll share with you briefly one of my favorite quotes. He says, "It's not the critic who counts. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who knows the great enthusiasms, the great devotions, who spends himself in a worthy cause, who at the best, in the end, knows the triumph of high achievement, and who at the worst, if he fails, at least fails while daring greatly, so that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who neither know victory nor defeat." So I believe all of you in this room are ready to get into the arena, and I'm grateful for that. But let's talk about what actually needs to be done. So 3 things need to be done. First, we have to address the crisis of meaning and belonging in this country. Second, we have to offer a compelling political vision. And third, we have to deliver on a policy agenda. Address the crisis of meaning and belonging. Right now, America is undergoing a profound, acute, and existential crisis of meaning and belonging. And it's affecting us in really, I think, 6 key ways. First, Americans are isolated individuals. We are isolated individuals. For the first time in American history, in 2023, there are more single adults in America than there are adults who are married with children, right? There are more single adults. First time in American history. This has radical implications for American politics. for many reasons, but two of them. The first is that if the primary constituency for government is not families, but single individuals, they are going to be demanding more and more from the government in order to sustain their life, because no one can go through life alone. That's just a reality. So that vision that Caleb was talking about the robust localism and federalism, and if you have an entire generation of people who are alone, the demands on the government is going to grow, right? Secondly, the financialization of the economy is going to grow, because people that are alone and individuals, right, they need debt to really, they need to be borrowing constantly to make up for the things that community used to provide for them from their family, from their civil society, and from their churches. So you actually have a kind of a nightmarish situation where you'll have big government growing bigger and bigger, and sort of a highly financialized economy, and a debt-based economy expanding ever greater, which of course erodes kind of the foundational understanding of our American Republic in the first place. The second is, what do people do if they're single and living alone? They go to work, they come home from work, and they are likely spending their time on social media, playing video games, watching porn, binge-watching Netflix, and smoking marijuana. Perhaps you've seen, but daily marijuana use has now outpaced daily alcohol use in America, again, for the first time in American history. So this is the crisis of the isolated individual that we're facing. And if that's the reality, no self-government is possible. Everything that the founders fought for, bled for, died for, it's impossible, right? That crisis has to be addressed. Second, the loss of religious faith. A third of Americans are now religiously unaffiliated. John Adams said famously, our Constitution is made only for a moral and religious people. It's wholly inadequate to the government of any other. And this loss of faith, religious faith, contributes to rising materialism and also a sense of hopelessness and nihilism. Third, the breakdown of families. Nearly 40% of births in America are now out of wedlock. That's doubled over the last 40 years. So these individuals who've experienced some sort of trauma from a broken family structure will take that into their adult life and also, unfortunately, pass that on to the next generation. Fourth, loss of cultural memory and identity. Nearly 70% of Americans fail a basic civic literacy quiz today. Just half are able to correctly name the branch of government where bills become laws. Less than half, right? So, we're hoping that they vote for Republicans in the fall, but like half of them don't even know essentially the equivalent of how to tie your shoe, right? And this is bad for politics, but also it's really sad commentary on our cultural identity, right? How can you really be proud to be an American if you don't know the first thing about how America works? Two more things, and I'll promise to move on from the bad news. Addiction. Deaths of despair are now over 100,000 per year in the United States. Back in 1990, the America that many of you grew up in, we only had 20,000 deaths of despair per year. So there's a 500% increase in the number of Americans that are killing themselves, right? And they're doing this through drugs. And this isn't going out and socializing and using recreational drugs. Not that I condone that, but this is not something that's done in community to cut off, blow off steam. This is something that's done alone, in isolation, because they cannot cope with the burden of modern life. And then finally, there's been a loss of vocational identity. Obviously, here in North Dakota, I've met many people in farming and in ranching, and there is a deep sense of vocation and purpose, and even community, even if much of your time is spent in isolation, but there's a solidarity with other people that share that profession. In the nation at large, with the gig economy model, right, that's a great model for people that are very successful, highly educated, and well-connected, and have strong families, but just don't have any families at all, right? But for your everyday person to have the endless possibilities of the gig economy before you, that is a tremendous burden, and so there's a longing for a sense of vocation and also community that comes with work. So I think this crisis is really creating a perfect storm in America. And amidst it, the rising generation is looking for answers. We see this in our work with college students, right? They want to be told how to live well. They feel powerless. They want people to help them understand how to live a healthy life, how to overcome these challenges. So as young people are looking and trying to get their way out of these crises, right, I believe that we need to be the political party that, before we even get to policy, is addressing this crisis of meaning and belonging, is taking America and taking the people in your community from a position of isolation to independence, from doubt and loneliness about their religion to faith in community, from trauma in their families to wholeness, from shame about their country and its history to confidence, from despair and addiction to hope and health, from dismay about their career prospects to dignity. And if we can be the party that is talking about independence, faith, community, wholeness, confidence, hope, health, and dignity, then I think we'll begin to reach this next generation. If you think of someone like Jordan Peterson, I'm sure many of you are familiar with Jordan Peterson, but here's a guy who comes to Fargo and gets 5,000 people to pack out a stadium. Many of those people are young men, right? And it's kind of remarkable that you have a Canadian academic who, dresses kind of funny and is giving lectures on the book of Genesis, who shows up, and he himself is not a Christian, at least yet, and it seems like he's moving in that direction, which is a great thing. But here he gives these talks and he packs out stadiums, right? 5,000 young people, nearly every place he goes. So I would say whatever Jordan Peterson is tapping into, right, it has vital potential. As a political party, I would lean into that. So if the Republican Party is going to restore the American dream, we need to push beyond platitudes and really start speaking to the heart. Second, we need to offer a compelling political vision. In my study of statesmanship over the past couple years, I've come to really believe that storytellers rule the world. Storytellers rule the world. Whoever sets the narrative, whoever tells the best story, wins big. And I think we need to start thinking really big as a party, right? We need to embrace big, sweeping, heroic rhetoric. We need to talk about the happiness, the greatness, and the independence of the American people. Think of Winston Churchill before the Second World War, right? He was one of the only people who really saw the threat of Nazism and Hitler. It sounds crazy now, but he had a lot of foresight when it came to this. And so how did he marshal people to his side? It was through the power of rhetoric. Winston Churchill would actually spend 1 hour practicing a speech for every minute that he was going to speak. Right? So this is a man who devoted a lot of time to public speaking. And so I'd recommend we actually look back to some of the great rhetoricians and campaigners in the historic Republican Party in the 19th century. Right? Look at William McKinley. His campaign motto was prosperity at home, prestige abroad. And then he had 2 big, bold words on either side of his posters. Commerce on one side and civilization on the other. You think of Garfield, his motto was harmony, peace, and prosperity. Hayes, liberty and union, just like your state motto here. Lincoln's motto was protection to home industry. And then as you move into the 20th century, you had Teddy Roosevelt talking about a square deal for the American people because they were afraid of being screwed over both by bureaucrats and also by big business. What about principles? So for concrete principles to back up our big, heroic rhetoric, I want to once again turn to Teddy Roosevelt. He outlined 5 principles that he felt like needed to be passed on, specifically to young people in school today. The first one was self-mastery, as opposed to self-indulgence. This really goes all the way back to Plato, right? Talking about how the order in an individual's soul mirrors the order in a community. And one of the first tasks of a statesman in the ancient world was to bring order to chaos. Because when you have chaos, you don't have justice and you don't have peace. And right now, when you look at the southern border, when you look at the crime in America's inner cities, when you look at the radical social agenda that the left is pushing, there's a lot of chaos, and our party needs to stand for order, not just in the public square, but also in our own personal lives. Second, Teddy Roosevelt was an advocate of common sense, as opposed to utopian ideology. William F. Buckley Jr., who was the first president of my organization, famously said he would rather be governed by the first 100 people in the Boston phone book than by the faculty of Harvard University. How much more true is that today than it was in the 1950s? Common sense. Number 3, individual responsibility and collaboration with others, as opposed to dependence and isolation. So all of the individual rights that we have in this country, they come with accompanying duties and responsibilities. We need to start talking about those duties and responsibilities. We need to be a party that leaves this country in a better place than when we found it. And finally, courage and resolution as opposed to cowardice and complacency. right? We can't, again, content ourselves with just voting for the right political party. We actually have the resolution, right, not just to share our views on social media, not just to vote for the right candidates, but actually to get in the arena and also to take the mantle of running for office onto ourselves. So these are the principles, and this is the vision I believe we need to turn our country around. Lastly, we have to deliver on a policy agenda, because we can't be all talk and no action. So we have to deliver on a policy agenda. So first and foremost, we need to fix what is broken in America. We need to start making people's lives better in tangible ways. If we can accomplish this, we will get tired of winning. We will build a new majority that lasts for a generation. I believe there are at least 6 existential issues that are facing America today. Crime, immigration, cost of living, education, national security, and social issues. On crime, we must restore public safety in America's major cities. When you have chaos, it's actually the poor and the working class that suffers the most. The elites are able to live in a gated community, to have a private driver. They don't have to deal with those realities. So we have to start enforcing the laws in our communities, start refunding the police, and hopefully, if it's possible, replace the lefty district attorneys that are following a catch-and-release policy. Number 2, on immigration, we have to restore order to our southern border. The number of migrant encounters has risen from 50,000 a year or less under the Trump administration to 250,000 a year under the Biden administration. Right? This poses many threats to the United States. First, it's a humanitarian catastrophe for the people who are attempting to get here and who are prey and victim to the drug cartels leading them across the border. Secondly, this undercuts the wages of America's working and middle classes and really only benefits big businesses. And it also creates a feudal society, which is antithetical to the principles of our American founding and the American Republic, where you have tens of millions of people living and working in a shadow economy in order to service the rest of the body politic. So what do we need to do? We need to first and foremost secure the southern border. We need to embrace E-Verify, right? Because people are coming here because businesses are willing to employ them, right? And so if there's a simple way that businesses can check the status of workers and also face penalties if they employ illegal workers, that's a top priority. Third, we need to reinstitute the Remain in Mexico policy. 4, have more judges for asylum cases. And 5, move to a merit-based immigration system. Number 3, cost of living. The cost of living in America is smothering the American dream, right? The middle class in America used to be literally the greatest middle class in the history of the world, and now they are getting crushed. So it's important that we restore economic growth and prosperity that is broadly shared. We need to stop spending money on projects that we don't need, we need to stop spending money we don't have on projects that don't serve our national interest. We need to restore America's energy independence, restore innovation, cut regulation and taxes for small businesses, and also start making things in America again. Number 4, education. The Republicans need to be the party that champions excellence in education. The problem with our education system is not just that it's woke, which it is in many cases, but also that it's mediocre, right, and monotonous, and doesn't prepare people to be good citizens, to be good husbands, wives, fathers, mothers, or even for a well-paying job. So we need to do a few things. Yes, we need to prevent the radical ideologies like CRT and like the agenda pushed by the massive bureaucracies at universities around DEI, right? We need to put an end to those and restore a merit-based system to our education. But that doesn't even begin to address the fundamentals, right? We need to pop the college bubble, this mentality, the idea that you have to go to college to participate in the American dream. It's bogus, right? That's not true anymore. And we need to call that out for the lie that it is. We need to encourage trades starting at a younger age and also an apprenticeship model, right? Even white-collar jobs could recruit students right out of high school and put them through a 6 or 12-month apprenticeship program. We need to start thinking outside of the box. Second, we need to return to the primary sources. There are all these debates about what should be included in the curriculum, but if we actually just went back to the primary sources and students were reading the Federalist Papers and Abraham Lincoln and Martin Luther King, we wouldn't need to actually get into many of these heated debates for the last 10 or 15 years
about the narrative of American history. Students would be able to decide for themselves. We need to restore civic education in our schools. We need a pay raise to retain and attract top teachers for our schools. And finally, we need to empower parents to play a greater role, really the primary role, in determining the education of their children. Number 5, national security. National security. We need to restore an America First approach to foreign policy. Otto von Bismarck said, anyone who has ever looked into the glazed eyes of a soldier dying on the battlefield will think hard before starting a war. In the 20th century, America saved the world from Nazism and from communism, right? This is one of the greatest achievements, not just in American history, but in world history, right? We should celebrate the key role America played in both of those efforts. But over the past 30 years, our foreign policy leadership class in DC has become highly ideological in their application of foreign policy, pushing regime change wars in Syria and Libya and Iraq, in Ukraine and in other places around this nation that have not made us safer or more prosperous. And now they're pushing a radical cultural agenda to the point where you actually have the pride flag being flown outside the Vatican at the U.S. Embassy and even in Afghanistan at the embassy. And you think, how on earth does this advance American national interest in the region? So we need to restore a sense of realism to our foreign affairs. I have 3 questions that we should be asking our elected officials before they send another dime to a foreign country, or before they engage us in another military project on the other side of the world, and send young men and women from Bismarck to die on the other side of the planet. Number 1, what is the end game? Number 2, does it serve our vital national interests? And number 3, does it make us safer, freer, or more prosperous? If they can't simply answer those 3 questions, not a dollar more of your taxpayer money, nor should your boys and girls be going to the other side of the world. Now, this is not to say that America necessarily needs to become Fortress America, right, or embrace isolationism. We can have peace through strength, but we need to actually prioritize. There are trade-offs. We have to prioritize the economic and military threat from China. We have to embrace energy independence, because that's a national security issue. We have to make our allies in Europe pay their fair share. We can't be subsidizing their welfare programs because we're paying all their military bills. We have to tackle the military-industrial complex. We have to embrace a more constitutional approach to foreign policy, where it's not just the president, right, deciding the next war to take us into, but Congress actually reclaiming their constitutional authority. And finally, social issues. Social issues. We have to understand that Christian ethical principles are the foundation for a free and virtuous society. Teddy Roosevelt said in his Thanksgiving Day address, "The things of the body are good, the things of the intellect are better, but the things of the soul are the best of all." Right? The understanding that the human being is of infinite worth and dignity, and that we are made in the image of God. Male and female, He created them. We have to be pro-life for the whole of life. We have to put the family at the center of all public policy decisions. Right? Another question for our legislators, right? Does this law or policy help or hurt your average middle-class family in America? The answer is that it hurts, right? That policy, that bill, that piece of legislation should not be passed. So these are the 3 things we need to do: address the crisis of meaning and belonging, offer a compelling political vision, and deliver on a policy agenda for the American people. Things looked bleak for this country during the Civil War, but it was Abraham Lincoln and the Republican Party that defeated slavery, preserved the Union, and built a new Republican majority that would last for a generation. Together, we can do that again. The American dream is dead, but it was the GOP that built the American dream. Together, we can do it again. Things looked bleak for Teddy Roosevelt when he came here. He lost his wife and his mother the same day. But he came here a boy and he left a man, and together we can do that again for a new generation of leaders from the state of North Dakota.